Welcome. Tonight, we journey into the world of ancient India. Thousands of years ago, along the banks of great rivers like the Ganges, early civilizations developed complex societies shaped by agriculture, trade, and spiritual traditions. Cities grew near fertile land, while villages spread across the countryside. Markets filled with goods such as spices, textiles, and crafted items. Temples and sacred spaces became centers of reflection and daily life. The rhythm of life followed the movement of the seasons, the flow of rivers, and the quiet routines of daily work. Tonight we will explore what life may have been like in this ancient world. From peaceful mornings in riverside villages to quiet evenings beneath the open sky. The Indus Valley Civilization. One of the earliest civilizations in ancient India developed along the Indus River around 2500 BC. Cities such as Harappa and Mohenjo-daro were carefully planned, with straight streets, drainage systems, and brick buildings. Homes were often built from baked bricks and included access to wells and bathing areas. The cities also had advanced systems for managing water, including covered drains that carried waste away. These features show a high level of organization and engineering. Although much about this civilization remains a mystery, its cities reveal a society that valued order, cleanliness, and planning. Life along the rivers. Rivers played a central role in the development of early Indian civilization. The Indus and later the Ganges River provided water for farming, transportation, and daily life. Farmers grew crops such as wheat, barley, and later rice. The rivers also supported fishing and trade. Settlements often formed along riverbanks, where fertile soil made agriculture possible. The steady flow of water shaped the rhythm of life for many communities. Farming and the seasons. Agriculture in ancient India depended heavily on the seasons. The monsoon rains brought water that nourished crops. Farmers carefully timed planting and harvesting to match these seasonal patterns. Rice became an important crop in regions with abundant water. Other crops included lentils, millet, and vegetables. Farmers used simple tools, but their understanding of the land allowed them to produce enough food to support growing populations. Early trade and exchange. Trade developed early in ancient India. Merchants exchanged goods such as pottery, beads, textiles, and metals. The Indus Valley Civilization even traded with distant regions, including Mesopotamia. Seals carved with symbols have been found, suggesting organized trade systems. Later, trade routes connected India with Central Asia, Persia, and beyond. These exchanges allowed goods and ideas to move between cultures. The Vedic period. After the decline of the Indus Valley Civilization, a new period known as the Vedic Age began. During this time, society became more centered around villages and agriculture. The Vedas, a collection of ancient texts, were composed during this period. These texts contained hymns, rituals, and early philosophical ideas. They played an important role in shaping the spiritual and cultural traditions of India. Daily life in villages. Most people in ancient India lived in small villages. Homes were often made from mud, wood, and thatch. Families worked together in farming, crafting, and daily tasks. Villages were usually surrounded by fields where crops were grown. Neighbors shared responsibilities and helped one another during planting and harvest. Life in these communities followed a steady and predictable rhythm. Ancient Indian markets. Markets were important gathering places in towns and cities. Merchants sold spices, grains, textiles, pottery, and other goods. People came not only to buy and sell but also to exchange news and stories. Markets connected rural villages with larger trade networks. Over time, these centers of trade helped support growing urban populations. The importance of cattle. Cattle were highly valued in ancient Indian society. They were used for farming, providing strength to pull plows and carts. Cows also provided milk, which could be turned into butter, yogurt, and other foods. Because of their importance, cattle were often treated with great care. In some traditions, they became symbols of wealth and prosperity. Early spiritual traditions. Spiritual life was deeply important in ancient India. People practiced rituals, offered prayers, and followed traditions described in early texts. Over time, philosophical ideas began to develop about life, the universe, and human existence. These ideas would later influence major religions such as Hinduism and Buddhism. Temples and sacred spaces became places of reflection and community. A calm evening in ancient India. As the sun begins to set over the fields and rivers, daily life slowly comes to a close. Farmers return from their work. Markets grow quieter as merchants pack away their goods. Families gather together for evening meals. The sky changes color as the light fades. Soon, the stars appear above the land. For a few peaceful hours, ancient India rests beneath the calm night sky. The cities of Harappa and Mohenjo-daro. The cities of Harappa and Mohenjo-daro were among the largest and most advanced in the ancient world. They were laid out in a grid pattern, with streets running straight and intersecting at right angles. Buildings were constructed using standardized baked bricks, showing a high level of planning. Many homes had access to private wells and bathing areas. One of the most remarkable features was the drainage system. Covered drains ran beneath the streets, carrying wastewater away from homes. This attention to sanitation was unusual for the time and suggests a society that placed importance on cleanliness and organization. The Great Bath of Mohenjo-daro. At the center of Mohenjo-daro stood a structure known today as the Great Bath. This large, rectangular pool was built using carefully fitted bricks and sealed to hold water. Steps led down into the bath from both ends. It is believed that the Great Bath may have been used for ritual bathing or communal gatherings. The presence of such a structure suggests that water held both practical and possibly spiritual importance. The care taken in its construction shows the skill of the builders and the value placed on this space. Writing of the Indus civilization. The people of the Indus Valley developed a system of writing that remains undeciphered today. Symbols have been found carved onto seals, pottery, and small tablets. These symbols may have been used for trade, identification, or record keeping. Because the writing has not yet been fully understood, much about their society remains unknown. However, the existence of writing suggests a complex and organized civilization. The role of craftsmanship. Craftsmanship played an important role in ancient Indian societies. Artisans created beads, pottery, jewelry, and tools using materials such as clay, stone, and metal. Bead making, in particular, was highly developed in the Indus Valley. These items were often traded across regions. Craftsmen worked carefully to produce goods that were both functional and decorative. Their work contributed to both daily life and long-distance trade. The use of seals in trade. Small carved seals were commonly used in the Indus Valley civilization. These seals often featured animal images along with symbols. They may have been used to mark goods or identify merchants. Pressing a seal into soft clay would leave an impression, similar to a signature. This system helped organize trade and may have been part of a larger administrative system. The Ganges River civilization. After the decline of the Indus Valley cities, new centers of life developed along the Ganges River. This region became one of the most important areas of ancient India. The river provided fertile land for farming and supported growing populations. Settlements expanded into towns and cities. Over time, the Ganges became not only a source of life but also a place of spiritual importance. The development of iron tools. During later periods of ancient India, the use of iron tools became more common. Iron allowed farmers to clear land more effectively and improve agriculture. Plows became stronger, making it easier to prepare fields. This technological change helped support larger populations. It also contributed to the growth of towns and more complex societies. The rise of kingdoms. As populations grew, small communities developed into larger political units. Kings began to rule over territories that included multiple villages and towns. These early kingdoms managed land, resources, and trade. Some became powerful centers of influence. This period marked the beginning of more organized political structures in ancient India. Trade beyond India. Ancient India was connected to other regions through trade. Goods such as spices, textiles, and precious stones were exchanged with Persia, Central Asia, and even the Mediterranean. Trade routes linked India to the wider world. These connections allowed not only goods but also ideas to travel between cultures. The calm of the river at night. As night falls along the rivers of ancient India, the world grows quiet. The water flows steadily through the dark landscape. Villages settle into silence. The sounds of the day fade, replaced by the gentle movement of water and distant night sounds. Above, the stars reflect softly on the surface of the river. For a few peaceful hours, the land rests. The early use of cotton. Ancient India was one of the first regions in the world to develop the use of cotton for textiles. As early as the Indus Valley civilization, people were spinning cotton into thread and weaving it into cloth. This made Indian textiles unique compared to regions that relied more on wool or linen. Cotton fabric was lightweight and well suited to the warm climate. Over time, cotton textiles became an important trade good. They were valued in distant regions and helped establish India as a center of textile production. Bead making and trade goods. Bead making was a highly developed craft in ancient India. Artisans created beads from materials such as carnelian, agate, shell, and even nettle. These beads were shaped, polished, and sometimes drilled with great precision. Many of these items were traded across long distances. Archaeologists have found Indian beads in regions as far as Mesopotamia. This suggests that trade networks extended far beyond local communities. The role of metalworking. Metalworking was an important skill in ancient Indian societies. Copper and bronze were used to create tools, weapons, and decorative objects. Later, iron became more common and allowed for stronger tools and more efficient farming. Metalworkers developed techniques for shaping and casting materials. Their work supported agriculture, construction, and trade. The use of standardized weights. The Indus Valley civilization used standardized weights for trade. Small stone weights of consistent size and shape have been discovered at archaeological sites. These weights suggest that trade was organized and carefully regulated. Merchants could measure goods accurately during exchanges. This level of standardization indicates a structured economic system. The structure of society. Ancient Indian society gradually developed complex social structures. During the Vedic period, society became organized into different groups based on occupation and role. These early forms would later influence the development of the caste system. Different groups contributed to society through farming, trade, craftsmanship, and leadership. Although this system evolved over time, it played a role in shaping social organization. The use of chariots. During the Vedic period, chariots became important for both transportation and warfare. Drawn by horses, these vehicles allowed for faster movement across open land. Chariots were often used by warriors and leaders. They also appear in early texts and stories. Their use reflects technological developments and changes in how people traveled and fought. The development of Sanskrit. The Sanskrit language developed during the Vedic period and became one of the most important languages of ancient India. Many early texts, including the Vedas, were composed in Sanskrit. It was used in religious rituals, literature, and scholarly work. Over time, Sanskrit influenced many other languages in the region. Its structure and vocabulary remain important in the study of ancient Indian culture. The role of oral tradition. Before writing became widespread, knowledge in ancient India was often passed down through oral tradition. Texts such as the Vedas were memorized and recited across generations. This required careful training and attention to detail. Through this method, complex ideas and stories were preserved without written records. Oral tradition played a key role in maintaining cultural continuity. The growth of towns and cities. As agriculture and trade expanded, small villages grew into larger towns. Some of these towns developed into early cities. Markets, workshops, and administrative centers began to appear. These urban areas became centers of trade and cultural activity. The growth of cities marked an important step in the development of more complex societies. The quiet end of the day. As the day comes to an end in ancient India, activity slowly fades. Farmers return from the fields. Merchants close their stalls. The sounds of the village grow quieter. Families gather together as the sky darkens. The steady flow of the river continues nearby. Above, the stars begin to appear. And for a few peaceful hours, the land rests in calm silence. The Mahajanapadas. Around the 6th century BC, parts of northern India were divided into regions known as the Mahajanapadas, or Great Kingdoms. There were traditionally 16 of these states, each with its own system of governance. Some were ruled by kings, while others operated more like early republics with assemblies. These regions competed for power, controlled trade routes, and influenced surrounding areas. The rise of the Mahajanapadas marked an important step toward larger and more organized political systems in ancient India. The Kingdom of Magadha. Among the Mahajanapadas, the Kingdom of Magadha became especially powerful. Located in the eastern part of the Ganges plain, it had access to fertile land and important trade routes. Magadha's rulers expanded their territory through both warfare and diplomacy. Over time, it became one of the dominant political centers in ancient India. This region would later give rise to major empires. The life of the Buddha. During this period, a prince named Siddhartha Gautama was born in northern India. After leaving his royal life, he spent years seeking understanding about human suffering. Eventually, he reached a state of enlightenment and became known as the Buddha. His teachings focused on understanding suffering and finding a path to inner peace. These ideas spread across India and later along trade routes to other regions. The spread of Buddhism. After the Buddha's teachings began to spread, monasteries were established across northern India. Monks traveled between communities, sharing ideas and offering guidance. These monasteries often became centers of learning. As trade routes expanded, Buddhism traveled beyond India into Central Asia, China, and beyond. The movement of merchants along routes like the Silk Road helped carry these teachings across vast distances. The Maurya Empire. In the 4th century BC, the Maurya Empire became one of the first large empires in India. Founded by Chandragupta Maurya, it unified much of the Indian subcontinent. The empire established systems of administration, taxation, and governance. Cities became centers of political and economic activity. This period marked a significant step towards centralized rule in ancient India. Emperor Ashoka. One of the most well-known rulers of the Maurya Empire was Ashoka. After a period of military expansion, Ashoka adopted the teachings of Buddhism. He promoted nonviolence, moral leadership, and respect for all people. Ashoka had inscriptions carved into stone pillars and rocks across his empire. These inscriptions shared his ideas and encouraged ethical behavior. His reign is remembered as a time of both power and reflection. Roads and communication. As kingdoms and empires grew, roads became increasingly important. These routes connected cities, markets, and administrative centers. Messengers carried information between regions. Merchants used these roads to transport goods. The development of roads helped unify large territories and support trade. Education and learning. Ancient India developed important centers of learning. Students studied subjects such as philosophy, mathematics, and medicine. Knowledge was often shared through discussion and teaching rather than written texts alone. Some early centers of learning attracted students from distant regions. This emphasis on education contributed to the development of complex ideas and traditions. The development of mathematics. Ancient India made important contributions to mathematics. Early concepts of numbers and calculation developed over time. Later, Indian scholars would contribute ideas such as the concept of zero and advanced number systems. These developments had a lasting influence on mathematics around the world. The stillness of night. As night falls across the fields and rivers of ancient India, the world becomes quiet. The sounds of the day fade into the distance. The river continues its steady flow. Villages rest beneath the dark sky. Above, the stars appear one by one. And for a short time, the land is calm and still. The Gupta Empire. Around the 4th century CE, the Gupta Empire rose to power in northern India. This period is often referred to as a golden age because of advancements in science, mathematics, literature, and art. The empire provided relative peace and stability, allowing culture and learning to flourish. Cities grew, trade expanded, and scholars produced important works. The Gupta period became one of the most influential eras in ancient Indian history. Advances in mathematics. During the Gupta period, Indian scholars made major contributions to mathematics. They developed more advanced number systems and methods of calculation. One of the most important developments was the use of zero as a number. This idea allowed for more complex calculations and would later influence mathematics around the world. Indian numerals eventually spread through trade and cultural exchange. Medicine and healing. Ancient India also made important contributions to medicine. Texts such as the Ayurveda described treatments using herbs, diet, and lifestyle practices. Doctors studied the human body and developed methods for treating illness. Some surgical techniques were also practiced. This knowledge was passed down through generations and continued to influence medical traditions. Literature and storytelling. During this time, literature became an important part of cultural life. Texts such as the Mahabharata and the Ramayana were passed down and written. These stories combined history, mythology, and moral lessons. They were shared through both oral storytelling and written forms. These epics became central to Indian cultural identity. Art and sculpture. Art flourished during ancient Indian civilizations. Stone carvings, statues, and temple decorations showed detailed craftsmanship. Artists created images of deities, animals, and scenes from daily life. Temples were often decorated with intricate designs. These artistic traditions reflected both religious beliefs and cultural values. Temple architecture. Temples became important centers of spiritual and community life. They were built using stone and decorated with carvings and sculptures. Different regions developed their own architectural styles. Temples served as places for worship, gathering, and reflection. Over time, they became some of the most impressive structures in ancient India. Trade across the Indian Ocean. In addition to land routes, India was connected to other regions through sea trade. Ships traveled across the Indian Ocean, connecting India with Arabia, East Africa, and Southeast Asia. Goods such as spices, textiles, and precious stones were transported by sea. Ports became important centers of trade and cultural exchange. This maritime network expanded India's influence beyond its borders. The role of guilds. Craftsmen and merchants in ancient India often organized themselves into guilds. These groups helped regulate trade, maintain quality, and support members. Guilds also played a role in setting prices and managing business practices. They provided stability and structure within growing urban economies. Daily life in cities. Cities in ancient India were centers of activity. Markets, workshops, temples, and homes filled the urban landscape. People worked as merchants, craftsmen, laborers, and officials. Streets were busy with movement during the day. Despite the activity, life still followed a steady rhythm shaped by work and routine. The quiet flow of the river. As evening settles across ancient India, the rivers continue their steady flow. The sounds of daily life begin to fade. Water moves gently through the landscape, reflecting the dim light of the sky. Villages and cities grow quiet. Above, the stars begin to appear. And for a moment, the world rests in calm silence. The urban planning of ancient Indian cities. As cities grew across ancient India, some developed organized layouts designed to support large populations. Streets were often arranged to allow movement between markets, homes, and temples. In earlier civilizations like the Indus Valley, cities such as Mohenjo-daro showed advanced planning with grid systems and drainage. Later cities continued to develop infrastructure suited to their environment. Public wells, storage areas, and gathering spaces were common. Urban centers became places where trade, governance, and daily life came together. Agriculture and irrigation systems. Agriculture remained the foundation of life across ancient India. Farmers relied on rivers, seasonal rains, and irrigation systems to support crops. In regions where rainfall was less predictable, canals and water management techniques were used. Rice, wheat, barley, and millet were among the main crops grown. Farmers also cultivated vegetables, fruits, and legumes. Understanding the timing of the monsoon was especially important. Too little rain could lead to poor harvests, while too much could damage crops. This balance shaped the agricultural rhythm of the region. The role of trade routes. India was connected to a wide network of trade routes both by land and sea. Overland routes connected India to Central Asia and Persia. These routes later linked with networks like the Silk Road. Merchants carried goods such as spices, textiles, ivory, and precious stones. Trade helped spread Indian culture, language, and technology beyond its borders. It also brought new ideas and influences into the region. The use of coins in trade. As trade expanded, the use of coins became more common. Early coins were often made of silver or copper and stamped with symbols. These coins allowed for more standardized transactions compared to barter. Merchants could more easily exchange goods across regions. The use of coinage helped support growing economies and trade networks. Education and centers of learning. Ancient India developed important centers of learning that attracted students from different regions. One of the most well-known was Takshashila, an early center of education. Students studied subjects such as philosophy, medicine, politics, and mathematics. Learning was often based on discussion, memorization, and oral teaching. These centers helped preserve and develop knowledge across generations. The development of philosophy. Ancient India became a center for deep philosophical thought. Thinkers explored questions about existence, consciousness, and the nature of reality. Ideas about karma, dharma, and the cycle of life developed over time. These philosophical traditions influenced religious practices and daily life. They encouraged reflection and understanding of one's place in the world. The role of artisans and daily work. Most people in ancient India were involved in practical forms of work. Farmers, craftsmen, traders, and laborers all contributed to society. Artisans created pottery, textiles, tools, and jewelry. Their work required skill and was often passed down through families. Markets provided a place where these goods could be exchanged. Daily work followed a steady rhythm shaped by seasons and local needs. A quiet night across the land. As night falls across ancient India, the activity of the day slowly comes to an end. The fields grow still. Markets close and grow quiet. The sounds of work fade into the distance. The rivers continue to flow through the land. Above, the sky fills with stars. For a few peaceful hours, the world rests in calm silence. The Mauryan administration system. The Mauryan Empire, especially under Chandragupta Maurya and later Ashoka, developed one of the most organized administrative systems of ancient India. The empire was divided into provinces, each governed by appointed officials. These officials were responsible for collecting taxes, maintaining law and order, and overseeing agriculture and trade. A network of spies and inspectors helped monitor activities across the empire. Records were kept to track resources, population, and economic activity. This system allowed the Mauryan rulers to manage a large and diverse territory effectively. Taxation and economic structure. Taxation played a central role in supporting ancient Indian states. Farmers often paid a portion of their crops as tax. Merchants and traders contributed through duties on goods being transported or sold. These resources were used to maintain roads, support armies, and fund administration. The system required careful organization to ensure fairness and efficiency. The Arthashastra. One of the most important texts describing governance in ancient India is the Arthashastra, traditionally attributed to Kautilya. This text outlines detailed ideas about administration, economics, military strategy, and law. It describes how rulers should manage their kingdoms, collect taxes, and maintain stability. The Arthashastra provides insight into the complexity of ancient Indian political thought. Trade with Southeast Asia. Ancient India maintained strong trade connections with regions in Southeast Asia. Goods such as spices, textiles, and beads were exchanged across the Indian Ocean. Indian cultural influences, including language and religious ideas, spread to these regions. Ports along India's coastline became important centers of trade. These connections helped expand India's influence beyond the subcontinent. Shipbuilding and navigation. Indian merchants developed knowledge of shipbuilding and navigation. Ships were designed to travel across the Indian Ocean, using seasonal monsoon winds to guide their journeys. Understanding wind patterns was essential for successful voyages. Sailors planned trips according to the timing of these winds. This allowed trade routes to remain consistent and reliable. The role of guilds in cities. Guilds became powerful organizations in ancient Indian cities. They regulated trade, maintained quality standards, and supported their members. Guilds could influence prices and production. They also played a role in local administration and economic stability. Membership in a guild provided protection and support for craftsmen and merchants. The spread of Hindu traditions. Over time, religious practices that would later be known as Hinduism developed and spread across India. These traditions included rituals, festivals, and beliefs centered around various deities. Temples became important places of worship and community gathering. Religious practices were closely connected to daily life. Pilgrimage and sacred travel. Travel for spiritual purposes became an important part of life in ancient India. Pilgrims visited sacred rivers, temples, and sites connected to religious stories. The Ganges River became especially significant as a place of spiritual purification. These journeys were often long and required dedication. Pilgrimage routes became another form of travel connecting different regions. The role of music and performance. Music and performance were part of both daily life and religious ceremonies. Instruments such as drums, flutes, and stringed instruments were used. Songs and stories were often performed during gatherings and festivals. These performances helped preserve cultural traditions and pass stories across generations. The slow rhythm of life. Life in ancient India moved at a steady and predictable pace. Daily routines were shaped by farming, trade, and seasonal changes. People woke with the sunrise and rested after sunset. Work, rest, and community interactions followed a natural rhythm. This steady pace created a sense of balance and continuity across generations. The Gupta administration and governance. During the Gupta Empire, governance became more structured but also somewhat decentralized compared to earlier empires like the Mauryans. Local rulers and officials were given a degree of autonomy while still recognizing the authority of the central king. The empire was divided into provinces, districts, and villages, each managed by appointed leaders. Village councils often handled local matters such as land distribution and conflict resolution. This layered system allowed the Gupta rulers to maintain control while adapting to regional differences. It also helped support stability across a large and diverse population. The use of land grants. One important feature of the Gupta period was the use of land grants. Kings and local rulers often gave land to officials, priests, or institutions as a reward or form of support. These grants sometimes came with rights to collect taxes from the land. Over time, this system contributed to the growth of local power structures. It also encouraged the development of agriculture in new areas. Advances in astronomy. Ancient India made important contributions to astronomy. Scholars studied the movement of the sun, moon, and planets with careful observation. One of the most well-known astronomers was Aryabhata, who proposed that the Earth rotates on its axis. He also made calculations related to planetary motion and eclipses. These ideas were highly advanced for their time and influenced later scientific thought. The concept of zero. One of the most significant contributions of ancient Indian mathematics was the development of zero as a number. This concept allowed for more complex calculations and made it possible to represent large numbers more easily. Zero became a key part of the number system that would later spread across the world. This innovation had a lasting impact on mathematics and science. The development of classical literature. During the Gupta period, literature flourished. Writers composed poetry, plays, and scholarly texts in Sanskrit. One of the most famous writers was Kalidasa, known for his plays and poetic works. His writings often explored themes of nature, love, and human experience. These literary works became an important part of India's cultural heritage. The role of religion in daily life. Religion remained deeply connected to everyday life in ancient India. People participated in rituals, festivals, and temple visits. Religious practices influenced social structure, daily routines, and community gatherings. Different traditions coexisted, including early Hindu practices, Buddhism, and Jainism. This diversity of belief systems contributed to a rich cultural environment. The growth of temple culture. Over time, temples became more than just places of worship. They served as centers of community life, education, and art. Temples often supported musicians, dancers, and scholars. They also acted as economic centers, receiving donations and managing land. The architecture of temples became increasingly elaborate, reflecting both religious devotion and artistic skill. A long view of ancient India. Across centuries, ancient India developed through many different periods and influences. From the early cities of the Indus Valley to the powerful empires of the Mauryas and Guptas, each era contributed to its growth. Trade, agriculture, philosophy, and science all played important roles. These developments shaped a civilization that would continue to influence the world long after these early periods ended. The evolution from Indus cities to Vedic society. After the decline of the Indus Valley civilization around 1900 BC, the structure of life across northern India gradually changed. Large, highly planned urban centers like Mohenjo-daro and Harappa slowly gave way to smaller, more rural communities. Archaeological evidence suggests shifts in climate, river patterns, and trade networks may have contributed to this transformation. As populations spread eastward toward the Ganges plains, new cultural patterns began to emerge. This period is often referred to as the Vedic Age, named after the Vedas, a collection of ancient texts composed in early Sanskrit. Unlike the urban Indus cities, Vedic society was more focused on agriculture, cattle herding, and village life. Communities were organized around family groups and tribes, with leadership often held by chiefs or kings. Over time, these societies became more settled, and social structures became more defined. The transition from the Indus Valley to the Vedic period represents one of the most important shifts in ancient Indian history, marking the movement from early urban planning to a more rural, tradition-based society that would later evolve into larger kingdoms. The structure and daily life of Vedic society. Life during the Vedic period followed a rhythm shaped by agriculture, seasonal changes, and ritual practices. Villages formed the center of daily life, surrounded by farmland and grazing areas. Families lived in simple homes made of wood, mud, and thatch. Cattle played a central role in the economy, often considered a measure of wealth. Daily routines included tending to crops, caring for animals, preparing food, and participating in community activities. Society gradually became organized into social groups based on roles and responsibilities. These early divisions would later develop into more formal systems. Religious rituals were an important part of life, often performed around fire altars. Priests, known as Brahmins, played a key role in conducting these ceremonies. The recitation of hymns from the Vedas was done with great care and precision, as these texts were preserved through oral tradition. This period laid the foundation for many cultural and spiritual traditions that would continue to develop in India for centuries. The rise of cities and second urbanization. Around the 6th century BC, northern India experienced what historians sometimes call a second wave of urbanization. New cities began to emerge along the fertile plains of the Ganges River. Advances in agriculture, including the use of iron tools, allowed farmers to produce more food. This surplus supported growing populations and the development of towns. Cities became centers of trade, administration, and cultural exchange. Markets expanded, and merchants began trading goods over longer distances. Craftsmen produced items such as pottery, textiles, and metal tools. This period also saw the rise of the Mahajanapadas, large territorial states that controlled land and resources. Some of these states developed early forms of governance that included assemblies and councils. The growth of cities during this time marked a major shift from village-based life to more complex urban societies. The religious and philosophical revolution. During the same period of urban growth, ancient India experienced a major shift in religious and philosophical thought. New ideas began to challenge older traditions and explore deeper questions about life and existence. This period saw the emergence of Buddhism and Jainism, alongside the continued development of early Hindu traditions. Siddhartha Gautama, known as the Buddha, taught about the nature of suffering and the path to inner peace. Mahavira, a central figure in Jainism, emphasized nonviolence and self-discipline. At the same time, thinkers within the Vedic tradition developed philosophical ideas that would later be recorded in texts known as the Upanishads. These writings explored concepts such as the nature of the self, the universe, and the cycle of life and rebirth. This era of intellectual and spiritual exploration created a rich and diverse philosophical landscape that would influence not only India but much of Asia. Trade networks and India's global connections. Ancient India was deeply connected to other regions through both land and sea trade. Overland routes linked India to Central Asia, Persia, and eventually the Silk Road networks. At the same time, maritime trade routes across the Indian Ocean connected India to Arabia, East Africa, and Southeast Asia. Indian merchants exported goods such as spices, textiles, ivory, and precious stones. In return, they imported metals, horses, and other valuable items. Ports along the western and eastern coasts became busy centers of commerce. Sailors used knowledge of monsoon winds to travel across the ocean, timing their journeys carefully to take advantage of seasonal patterns. These trade networks allowed India to become a major center of economic and cultural exchange. Ideas, religions, and technologies moved along with goods, connecting India to the wider ancient world. The Mauryan Empire and the First Great Unification. In the late 4th century BC, the Indian subcontinent saw the rise of one of its first large unified states, the Mauryan Empire. Founded by Chandragupta Maurya, this empire expanded rapidly across northern and central India. With the guidance of his advisor Kautilya, also known as Chanakya, Chandragupta established a strong administrative system that allowed him to control vast territories. The capital city of Pataliputra became one of the largest urban centers of its time. The Mauryan state maintained a standing army, collected taxes, and developed systems for managing agriculture and trade. Roads were improved to connect distant regions, and communication networks allowed information to travel across the empire. This level of organization marked a major shift in political power and laid the groundwork for future empires. Emperor Ashoka and the transformation of rule. One of the most significant rulers of the Mauryan Empire was Ashoka, who came to power in the 3rd century BC. Early in his reign, Ashoka expanded the empire through military campaigns. However, after witnessing the suffering caused by war, particularly during the conquest of Kalinga, he underwent a profound change. Ashoka embraced the teachings of Buddhism and began promoting values such as nonviolence, compassion, and moral responsibility. He ordered inscriptions to be carved onto rocks and pillars throughout the empire. These inscriptions, known as the Edicts of Ashoka, encourage ethical behavior, respect for all life, and tolerance among different beliefs. Ashoka also supported the spread of Buddhism beyond India, sending missionaries to other regions. His reign represents a unique moment in history where imperial power was combined with a strong emphasis on moral governance. The Gupta Golden Age and cultural flourishing. Several centuries after the Mauryan Empire, the Gupta Empire rose to prominence around the 4th century CE. This period is often described as a golden age due to its achievements in art, science, mathematics, and literature. Under Gupta rule, political stability allowed scholars and artists to thrive. Mathematicians made advances in number systems, including the use of zero. Astronomers studied planetary motion and developed models to explain celestial events. Literature flourished, with works written in Sanskrit that explored themes of nature, love, and philosophy. Temples and sculptures from this period showed detailed craftsmanship and artistic innovation. The Gupta era became a foundation for many cultural traditions that continued to shape Indian society. The development of religion and philosophy. Ancient India became one of the world's most important centers of philosophical thought. Religious traditions developed over time, influenced by earlier Vedic beliefs as well as new ideas. What we now call Hinduism evolved gradually, incorporating rituals, stories, and philosophical teachings. Concepts such as karma, dharma, and samsara became central to understanding life and existence. Buddhism and Jainism also continued to grow, offering different paths towards spiritual understanding. These traditions often coexisted, influencing one another and contributing to a diverse religious landscape. Temples, monasteries, and sacred sites became places where people could reflect, learn, and connect with their beliefs. Daily life across regions and landscapes. Across ancient India, daily life varied depending on the region. In fertile river valleys, farmers cultivated crops and relied on seasonal rains. In forested areas, communities gathered resources from the land. In coastal regions, people engaged in fishing and maritime trade. Cities brought together merchants, craftsmen, and officials, creating busy centers of activity. Despite these differences, many aspects of life remained consistent. Families worked together, communities shared responsibilities, and daily routines followed the natural rhythm of sunrise and sunset. Over time, these patterns created a sense of continuity across generations. The growth of temple architecture and sacred spaces. As religious traditions developed across ancient India, temples became increasingly important centers of both spiritual and community life. Early sacred spaces may have been simple altars or open-air sites, but over time, these evolved into large and carefully designed temple structures. Stone temples began to appear, often decorated with detailed carvings that depicted deities, mythological stories, and scenes from daily life. Different regions developed distinct architectural styles. In the north, temples often featured tall, curved towers known as shikaras, while in the south, structures became more elaborate with layered towers and expansive courtyards. Temples were not only places of worship but also centers for music, dance, education, and social gathering. They often received donations of land and wealth, allowing them to support priests, artists, and workers. In this way, temples became deeply connected to both the spiritual and economic life of the community. The Indian Ocean Trade Network. While overland routes connected India to Central Asia and beyond, the Indian Ocean Trade Network became equally important. Using knowledge of seasonal monsoon winds, sailors were able to travel between India, Arabia, East Africa, and Southeast Asia. Ships would sail with the winds in one season and return when the winds reversed. This predictable pattern made long-distance sea travel more reliable. Ports along India's western and eastern coasts became busy centers of commerce. Merchants traded goods such as spices, cotton textiles, ivory, and precious stones. These maritime connections allowed Indian culture, language, and religious ideas to spread far beyond the subcontinent. The spread of Indian culture beyond India. Through trade and travel, Indian cultural influence reached many distant regions. In Southeast Asia, Indian ideas about religion, language, and governance became deeply influential. Sanskrit inscriptions have been found in places such as Cambodia, Indonesia, and Thailand. Temples inspired by Indian designs were built in these regions. Stories from Indian epics like the Ramayana were adapted into local traditions. This process was not forced but occurred gradually through contact, trade, and shared exchange. Over time, these influences blended with local cultures to create new traditions. The role of law and social order. Maintaining order within growing societies required systems of law and social organization. Ancient Indian texts, such as the Dharmashastras, outlined guidelines for behavior, duties, and responsibilities. These texts described how individuals should act within society based on their roles. They also addressed issues such as justice, property, and relationships. Although these systems evolved over time, they helped provide structure to complex communities. Social order was closely tied to both tradition and religious belief. The long continuity of civilization. One of the most remarkable aspects of ancient India is the continuity of its civilization. Across thousands of years, many traditions, beliefs, and practices continue to evolve rather than disappear. From the early Indus Valley cities to the Vedic period, and later empires like the Mauryas and Guptas, each era built upon the previous one. Languages changed, political systems shifted, and new ideas emerged. Yet many core cultural elements remained connected. This long continuity created a civilization that adapted over time while maintaining deep roots in its past. The slow passing of time. Across ancient India, time moved in a way that felt steady and continuous. Days began with the rising sun and ended beneath a sky filled with stars. Seasons shifted gradually, guided by the arrival of the monsoon rains and the return of dry skies. Farmers, merchants, and families all lived within these natural cycles. There were no clocks to measure each passing moment. Instead, time was felt through routine, through nature, and through the quiet repetition of daily life. Over years and generations, this rhythm remained, connecting people to the land and to one another. The sound of the land at rest. As evening deepens, the sounds of activity slowly fade. The voices of markets grow quiet. Footsteps along village paths become less frequent. In their place, softer sounds begin to take over. The gentle flow of rivers continues through the night. Wind moves quietly through trees and fields. Distant animals call out across the landscape. These sounds form a calm and steady background, marking the transition from day into night. Homes beneath the night sky. Inside homes across ancient India, families settle in for the night. Oil lamps flicker softly, casting warm light against walls of clay, wood, or stone. Simple meals have been shared. The work of the day has come to an end. Outside, the world grows darker and quieter. The sky above stretches wide, filled with stars. Within these homes, there is a sense of rest and stillness. The rivers continue to flow. Even as people rest, the great rivers of India continue their quiet movement. The Ganges and other rivers flow steadily through the land, just as they have for thousands of years. Their waters reflect the moonlight and the stars. These rivers have supported life, carried trade, and shaped civilization. And through every night, they continue their journey without pause. A final quiet night in ancient India. Now, imagine one final peaceful night in ancient India. The villages are still. The fields rest beneath the darkness. The markets are empty and silent. The air is calm. Above, the stars stretch across the sky in quiet patterns. Nothing rushes. Nothing disturbs the stillness. For a few gentle hours, the world is at rest. Thank you for listening. Thank you for joining this quiet journey through the world of ancient India. From the early cities of the Indus Valley to the great rivers, growing kingdoms, and peaceful villages, this land was shaped by centuries of tradition, knowledge, and daily life. Its contributions to mathematics, philosophy, religion, and trade helped influence the world in lasting ways. Even now, many of these ideas and traditions continue to be part of everyday life. If you enjoyed this peaceful exploration of history, consider subscribing to Dreamtime History for more calm journeys through ancient civilizations, daily life in the past, and quiet stories designed to help you relax and fall asleep. For now, rest well. And thank you for listening.